second, a moment of silence to remember D-Day. This is June 6th, 79th anniversary. Just remember those allies and American forces gave their lives. So have a y'all will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. Our first item is approval of the agenda. I would like to entertain a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The agenda is approved. And let's remember, Miss Patty, congratulations, by the way.
Yeah.
for Certification, town clerk, certification. Please remember to say who you are if we need to. And the minutes were sent out to everyone. Hope everyone's had a chance to look at those. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Make a motion, we approve.
Thanks, Mr. Foster.
Second.
Thanks, Mr. Cole. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
All right. And our next item is public comment. Do we have anyone who would like to speak tonight about any items, anything? Do we have any email public comment?
Staff's received nothing.
Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on. Old business. Seems we have no old business tonight. All right, new business. We have a rezoning request, R23-01. Miss Judy Alvarez, 1936 Butler Bridge Road. Gotcha.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. So as usual, I'll summarize my staff report for those listening online. It's a little further away from me. So the town received a rezoning application on April 18th of this year from Judy Alvarez, the administrator of the estate of B.B. Alvarez, who owned a 1936 BBR LLC, which is the listed owner of the subject property on Butler Bridge Road. Judy Alvarez has appointed James Andrews, who's here tonight to assist her with the rezoning process. And the request before you is to rezone 1936 Butler Bridge Road from Mills River Low Density Residential, or MR30, to Mills River Neighborhood Commercial, MRNC. So the subject property is about 2.3 acres, has an approximately 6,800 square foot commercial building on it, 1,600 square foot garage, and the current occupant is Air Check, which is a radon testing kit and equipment business. And the property is directly across the street from Glen Marlowe Elementary School. Just a little more background, because this is a bit of an interesting case. So the primary commercial building was actually built on the property in 1978. An addition was added in 98. This is all in the Henderson County real property public records. And then Air Check, or Mr. Alvarez, purchased the property around 1990. So Air Check has been operating on the property since 1990 or early 90s. It was only when the town incorporated in 03 when the property was zoned a low density residential. So essentially that made the existing commercial business a non-conforming use, and our zoning code has specific rules and regulations for non-conformities. That's specifically in 154, 105D of the code. And basically it states non-conforming uses cannot be extended, enlarged, or altered except for safety repairs to existing structures, building maintenance, etc. And an existing non-conformity can only be converted to a more conforming use of land once that non-conforming status is lost. So an example for MR30 is it could become publicly used property or single family residential. The town code is relatively strict with non-conforming uses in planning. Ideally, you want non-conforming uses to phase out over time. So again, everything in the zoning district is conforming. So one of the provisions is if the non-conforming use is ever discontinued for 6 months, you lose that legal non-conforming status. And even though there may be a commercial building there, you can only develop that for uses allowed in the MR30 zoning district. So really, in discussing with the applicant in our pre-application meeting, the main reason we're here tonight is because this has been a commercial property for a long period of time. And again, when the town incorporated, the residential MR30 zoning was applied. So they wish to rezone to neighborhood commercial so they can continue operating as a conforming use and also continue to invest in the property. Brief overview of the zoning district. So MR30 is intended to be a quiet neighborhood consisting primarily of single-family homes. Uses allowed by right are single-family homes, churches, home occupations, family care homes, etc. The MR30 uses are attachment C in your packet. And then I also have included the neighborhood commercial zoning district uses. And again, the description of that in the code is that it's a district meant to provide for compatible residential and commercial uses, which protect and enhance the rural characteristic of Mills River. So again, example uses permitted by right are retail, business, or service within an enclosed building, public buildings, offices, single-family homes, and others. With a minor special use permit in neighborhood commercial, you could do a restaurant, hospital, clinic, library, or other civic use. And then with a major special use permit, multifamily, planned residential development, and actually those are all the same as the current base zoning MR30 right now. So again, and especially since we have some newer board members where this may be their first rezoning. So the proposed district is neighborhood commercial. And although sometimes an applicant may have a proposed use for a property or an existing use that will continue, we have to consider all uses in the neighborhood commercial district, because again, when a property is rezoned, it stays that way in perpetuity unless it's rezoned again. So again, important to look at the neighborhood commercial district uses to make sure that's compatible with the area. And then again, failure to consider all those uses and hone in on one specific use or development could be considered contract zoning, which is illegal in the state of North Carolina. So a little more background about the area. I will pull up a map for this real quick. Moment. Go. All right, just to give everyone a little context, here's a map of the property from GIS. So all parcels immediately adjacent to the subject property are currently zoned MR30 low density residential. That includes the Glen Marlowe School across the street and the surrounding residential homes on both sides and to the rear of the subject property. As we did with a similar rezoning about 6 to 9 months ago, I like to put these in context with other rezonings done in the area. So one example is the daycare center at 2115 Butler Bridge Road, which I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen, but is right here at the corner. That was originally zoned MR30. It's 750 feet west of the subject property and was rezoned from MR30 to neighborhood commercial via zoning map amendment 0306 approved by council February 8th of 07. And then the most recent one the town considered was the property. There was a portion of the Anointed Word church property just off the map on the south side here. That was another request. Well, there was an original request to go from MR30 to general business, which was denied. And then there was a resubmission about a year later to go from MR30 to neighborhood commercial, which was approved by council on December 8th of last year. And that is about 1,500 linear feet west of the subject property down Butler Bridge Road. So staff's reviewed this. Staff has found that this rezoning request for 1936 Butler Bridge Road is consistent with the Making Mills River 2040 Comprehensive Plan and Future Land Use Map, which designates this property and adjacent parcels as the mixed residential land use category. And I might as well scroll to that now real quick. So again, we have current zoning map. You can see it's surrounded by MR30 and then the two properties that were rezoned to neighborhood commercial. And then this is the proposed zoning map for the subject property. And then the future land use map. Identifying this as in the mixed residential district. And if we look at the district table from the comprehensive plan, you can basically see the mixed residential future land use district identifies desirable future land uses as single family homes, schools, duplexes, parks, and public space, and also identifies acceptable future land uses as retail, restaurants, office, institutional, civic and community uses, et cetera. And those are in alignment with many of the permitted uses in the neighborhood commercial zoning district. One other important thing to consider is that since we are rezoning one parcel different from adjacent properties, and this one stands out a little more than some of the other ones we've done that are adjacent to a similar district, we do have to have additional considerations to protect from a spot zoning challenge. So again, spot zoning is generally described as singling out and reclassifying a small tract of land owned by a single person or entity different from a much larger surrounding area that is uniformly zoned. So this would fit within that. Again, it's legal to do this as long as it's supported by a reasonable basis. Now, the planning board, what I'll read next is basically points I'd like for the board to consider in their discussion. Basically supporting that this is a reasonable rezoning request. When it comes to go before council, they will actually adopt a statement of reasonableness along with the statement of consistency, which will basically put that in writing. So again, just note these, and this is on the second page of my staff report. So when considering a potential spot rezoning request, the planning board should consider the following. And these all should be reflected in the public record in the board's discussion. So the size and physical attributes of the site or subject property, the compatibility with the existing comprehensive land use plan, the benefits and detriments to the landowner, the neighbors, and the community, the relationship between the proposed uses and the current uses of adjacent properties, and why the rezoning is in the public interest, and any changed conditions warranting the rezoning. That's about the end of my report. Staff does recommend approval of this rezoning request, finding it to be consistent with the future land use map and specific elements of the Making Mills River Comprehensive Plan. Staff has drafted a statement of consistency for the board's consideration, which is attachment I in your packet. And I'm happy to take any questions. And we also have the applicant here tonight as well.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? Or do we want to wait until the applicant? Listen. Go back to the right. I have a question there. I just want to draw my notes back. I do have a question about the future, the comprehensive plan. Are there uses that would be allowed under MR neighborhood NC that would not be allowed under the mixed residential? So for instance, if we were to rezone this and then a use were to be there, then once the comprehensive plan is in place with the new type of zoning, could that be a hardship that would have to be addressed at a later date? Sorry. Okay, so if there's a use that's allowed under MRNC that is not allowed under the comprehensive land use plan, would that create a hardship at a later date? All right, would that create a non-conforming use? So yeah. I'm not saying that's, I'm just asking.
Reasonableness, I don't know if it would affect the reasonableness, because that's kind of up for the board to discuss. But the main item that does not fall within it, comparing these two, is basically service. So I mean, it's kind of confusing. Neighborhood commercial, the first permitted use says retail business or service conducted within an enclosed building. And here under mixed residential, you have retail called out. Service is not called out. But again, staff's interpretation is that they're close enough within an enclosed building that that was acceptable. And then it goes on in neighborhood commercial to say retail business making products sold on the site. So that's covered. Public facilities, offices, single family homes, and neighborhood commercial are all covered in the mixed residential land use designation. So I guess it would really just be the service that is not called out in the mixed residential future land use designation.
And the reason I'm asking, if conditional zoning were in place, then this could be conditionally zoned in order to, make sure that future land uses were, basically, we could determine that a particular land use or group of uses were acceptable, and not necessarily all the land uses that would be allowed under MRNC zone.
That's correct.
Right.
Between now
And then, so,
Correct.
right, so the request could be made for a group which would exclude anything that wouldn't be allowed in the future, and that would be so much easier. But, and again, the request could be made that would allow any of the uses, so just throwing it out there, something to think about.
Michael, when did that feature like? The trigger that changes that.
You're saying the mixed residential category? That, I mean, that's what was adopted in the comprehensive plan. So until the comprehensive plan is amended, that's what stands. You're talking about this category right here. Mhm. Oh, no. Well, the comprehensive plan looks out to 2040. But the comprehensive plan also says we should amend it every 5 years. So technically, you don't want to leave these plans on the shelf just to gather dust. So technically every, half a decade, we should be looking at them and reevaluating because conditions change.
And to be piggyback on Mr. Ross, does that mean that at some point in time, the zoning as we know it will become this type of zoning with these categories: community crossroads, community center, industrial employment? Or does the zoning that we have now stay and this is just a guideline?
The last
Does that
statement would
make
be the
sense?
most correct. Yeah. So
So this will be a
the
guideline.
zoning is going to stay as is unless the town or a property owner initiates a rezoning application. And then again, the comprehensive plan and future land use map is meant as a guide to support rezonings and the compatibility with the comprehensive plan. Because again, staff's role and really what I look at is it consistent with the comprehensive plan that was adopted by the town or not? And I just recommend yes or no based on whether it's consistent or not.
Sure. So
Mhm.
it's really not a consideration. I mean, it is a consideration, but let's say that under MRNC zoning, services are allowed today. At some point, if there's services established, then they'll still be there. They won't be non-conforming in 2046.
Correct, because it would be based on the zoning
The
district.
zoning.
Correct,
This is just a guideline.
correct.
Sounds good.
Non-conforming. I did have one other question about that. What did you made the comment something, I'm sorry to get on with that, about 6 months of non-use.
Yeah, so the zoning ordinance has a non-conformity section. And again, in planning, you want to decrease non-conformities over time because you don't want conflicting uses next to each other. And this is very common. I've seen this in other places where I worked, 180 days or 6 months. If that use is not continued for 6 months, you lose non-conforming status. Now, obviously, the town would need to document that, and that can be difficult at times. But that, a property owner who, let's say, had a non-conforming use, let's say Air Check went out of business and that place was not used for 6 months. If the town documented that, despite everything being on that property, it would not be allowed to be used.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, they are operating now as non-conforming. And if we don't do anything, they can still operate as non-conforming, right?
Correct.
Okay.
but they can't change anything
I
on the
understand
property
that.
at all. Yeah,
They can't, but they can still operate. We're not gonna, if we turn it down, we're not gonna put them out of business.
no, not at all.
But when the town was incorporated, the zoning that was chosen for this piece of property didn't fit the use on that piece of property.
Correct.
But as long as
So
they
they
operate
made it
as
not-
is, they can continue unless they stop operation for 6 months.
Correct.
Okay.
But they can't make any real improvements.
No addition of any
No
kind,
addition,
no expansion of any
no
kind.
expansion. If something were to be damaged, it had to be replaced on the same footprint, would that be allowed, or would that?
Only to within the exact dimensions it exists now.
I mean, they
Really?
could make repairs, but if they had a major fire, then they would have to.
No, they could still rebuild. So again, you can repair damage. So if all the structures burn down tomorrow, you could rebuild them, but only in the exact size they are today.
This is new to me, obviously new on the board here. Just a quick question. When somebody wants to create a use for the property that requires either a minor or a major special use permit, what is that special use permit process?
So it all depends upon the zoning district. Let me pull up the neighborhood commercial ordinance as an example. So this is the neighborhood commercial zoning ordinance. So we have our, by right permitted uses where if you fall within 1 through 13, all you need is a zoning permit, administrative staff approval. But if you scroll down, it says here, use is allowed with a minor special use permit, and minor special uses are heard by the town board of adjustment. So these uses listed in this section, hospitals, restaurants, bed and breakfast, home occupations, etc., could be allowable, but only with a special use permit, minor approval from the board of adjustment in a quasi judicial hearing. And then, or maybe this one doesn't have major special use permits.
I didn't see it.
Other zoning districts have major special use permit allowances that are usually reserved for even higher impact developments. And again, those go all the way to town council with a planning board
The
review
major one?
beforehand. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a more involved,
Okay,
in-depth
and that's
process.
right. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm good.
Okay. Would the applicant like to speak? You're more than welcome to, or if not,
Come to the microphone. Would you come to the microphone?
My only concern for Mrs. Alvarez is continued revenue from the property. BV, a longtime close friend, bought the property and moved his air check business in there. The business is still mainly a retail. Everything is enclosed under the same enclosed building. If there comes a time that Mrs. Alvarez decides that she wants to sell the business, at this point, she would be drastically impacted on value because of the fact that the property is grandfathered in at this point. And that, of course, she has a lease term that's in place right now with the existing business that they sold. And that's the major reason for this, the business to continue as we spoke, as it is today. And that business is probably going to continue long term as long as, and there may be a possibility that, of course, that company would like to buy the property. I'm sure that's in the future. And my concern is to make sure that she's not impacted negatively if that were to be the case. And as we stand at this point, if she were to sell the property without it being rezoned, with the residential commercial use, that would cease to be able to be used as such. Is that correct?
The use could continue as long as it's not abandoned for 6 months, but they cannot make improvements to the property or expand the operation.
Right. But as it stands, existing exactly as it is today, if they were to buy the property, they could continue doing exactly what they do now in the leased space.
Correct.
That's,
You answered
that's,
the question I had.
Let me ask you a question right there. It doesn't have to be that company. It just has to not be abandoned for 6 months. Be another company performing.
similar operation, yeah. I'm assuming that's correct.
Similar or not.
It gets to an interesting, there's always gray areas in planning. Because when a business will want to go there, there'll most likely be the need for an upfit, some type of remodel, and that won't be possible.
Interior. That's just-
Oh, no, I mean, that's why I've got the code here.
The non-conforming is not tied to that tenant.
No,
I just want to understand that.
Well, I'm
not
sorry.
creating the non.
That's,
But it's the use and it's the size of the building. And then the restriction is there for any upgrades that a potential new user can do.
Oh, I get it, but the logic says I'm gonna update it 24. I'm not-
interior, I think,
Or even down.
I think interior I don't think has any impact at all.
so
Love to hear
it, no, the interior would fall. Nothing can be altered in any way. So it basically says right here, a non-conforming use may not be extended or enlarged, nor shall a non-conforming, structure be altered except as follows. Alterations required by law or safety, maintenance and repair to keep it in good condition. And then something about existing single-family homes, which doesn't apply. Expansion of a non-conforming use of a building or structure into portions of the structure, which at the time the use became non-conforming were already erected and arranged. So basically, even if there's a building there that wasn't used by air check, like let's say the garage was not used by them and they wanted to move into that, that would not be allowed either.
Pretty strict.
Yep.
Question that may not be relevant. I assume it was conforming back to Henderson County zoning pre-corporation of Middletown.
I do not know. I
You
tried to
know that?
look up the old county zoning map and could not find one to my avail.
Mike, can I ask you a question? The tenant, existing tenant or new tenant with the same conforming use can't upgrade bathrooms or offices?
I can't answer that because all I can do now is read what the ordinance says and I don't like to offer on the spot interpretations, but no, you're fine.
My
But
question
it
is,
says right now that the structure cannot be altered.
we're talking about the footprint. We're not talking about painting the room or something. Are we talking about the footprint of the building?
But we also have corridor overlay district standards. So if you remodel a building and if there's something on the exterior that changes, that it does not even involve the footprint, the architectural standards apply. So there are,
Trigger it,
yes,
and it says structure there. To me, that's extremely strict. It says structure.
structure, the definitions right here, anything constructed or erected, the use of which requires permanent location on the ground or attached to something having permanent, yes.
Probably not getting worse.
I don't have any other question.
But it would, sir, if you don't mind, it would significantly impact the value of the property. If let's say the current tenant decides to move somewhere bigger and, now building's empty, to find someone else to come in, they would have to, similar use, would have to be happy with the exact building as it is. They can't come in and refit and then, let's say it, for some reason, Ms. Alvarez decides to sell, then someone else who would buy the property is still restricted to this, and that would affect the value of the property
And again, at this
negatively.
point, Mike, I have a lot of questions regarding that interior upfitting. And without changing the structure, without moving any walls, without moving anything that has to do with the footprint, then I don't know that this is the time for me to ask those, but I would want to bring that, again, if this is the time, I mean, I don't see that there would be structure if the roof needs repair, as long as it's architecturally compatible with the existing look. But again, there may be some questions that we may need to ask you at a later date, but there is some upfitting plan, interior upfitting plan, not gonna change, and it's by the existing tenant. But it's just, I don't know that any town, any zoning, anybody would be concerned with what's going on inside as far as changing.
Sure.
Let's say I change this conference room into 2 bathrooms and a storage room.
Yes, sir.
I don't see that that has any effect whatsoever on zoning.
No, I agree.
Sure.
I mean, and I mean, interior upfits, like someone said, to incorporate a new bathroom or to change the configuration of office space do happen all the time without the town issuing a zoning permit because it does not trigger the code. I was just saying if there are other things like the corridor overlay district architectural requirements that if something were changed on the outside and the building footprint stayed the same, if the building footprint stayed the same, it would trigger a zoning review, even though the footprint doesn't change. It just is a case by case thing, and you know,
And one other question I have for all of you is aesthetic value. Let's say that the existing tenant decides that they want the building to be a little snazzier looking on the outside. As long as the footprint, the structure doesn't change architecturally, aesthetic, is that completely out? Or is that?
if I'm making an interpretation now, I would say yes, because the exterior of the building would trigger a zoning review because we have architectural requirements for Butler Bridge Road for non-residential structures. So since it would trigger a zoning review, and since this says structures may not be altered in any way, I mean, I think the answer would be no. That wouldn't be allowed.
But would it be open for at least an application or review?
Oh, of course, yeah. Anyone can apply for anything. You know, staff will just give feedback based on the ordinance, and if it's not able to be accomplished, it would just be denied.
So the the next potential owner, assuming that property does go on the market, would be a very small group of people in comparison, because there's only a certain amount of things that can go in to keep it existing. So versus the property being able to be bought by another business who could come in and tear that down and build the facility they need, they wouldn't even look at it because it's not a possibility. So starting back in 2004, when the property was zoned, it was at that point non-conforming through no action of the owners. And so something happened back then that impacts the value of the property today. That's what's going through my mind. Something happened back then to create, the non-conforming use. And is that something that could be correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if I take into consideration the fact it was here long before Mills River, it was a commercial property in use then, it still is. There are strict restrictions even on MRNC. Staff approves it. They've been here longer than the town of Mills River. I don't see any reason not to, so I would make a motion to approve it.
Okay, thank you. Is this all the discussion we need? Or are we at a point where we're ready for a motion? So
Please don't
thank you.
forget the reasonableness discussion
Yeah, we
items.
probably ought to discuss reasonable.
If we're finished with our applicant or the registrant,
Yeah,
can-
sir. Thank you so
Thank
much.
Thank you.
appreciate it.
So, yeah, I think we discuss it as a group, and determine if it's reasonable. And, discuss here the statement of consistency. Are we comfortable? And we wouldn't need to vote on these like we do at the Board of Adjustments. This is just, do we agree that it fits within?
Ideally, just for the record to reflect it, and because I do think this is different from other rezonings we've seen and very much could be considered spot zoning without the reasonableness backing it up. It'd be ideal for the board just to go through each of these items. And if anyone has anything to contribute to the discussion, just so we can note that in the record. To
And-
Michael,
protect
will you
the-
get me on the right page with where you're speaking to? please?
Page 2 at the very bottom.
And my understanding, one
Great,
of the
thank you.
considerations that could make something spot zoning is if the town determines to zone one piece of property. I believe the word capricious was in there somehow, that if the town chooses a piece of property and zones it, rezones it, not within, not unreasonable, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's
The-
what would make it spot zoning.
Yeah, the town is more immune to a legal challenge if there is reasonableness to back up the decision. Again, council will have an actual document for that because that's during the
Mhm.
public hearing. For the planning board, we'd just like to see it reflected in the record.
So we'll discuss the statements of consistency and make sure everyone is familiar with this statement about spot zoning.
Well, I do have my big concern about the spot zoning thing. Because you look at the map and I just have my doubts about the spot zoning. But again, we have a business that's operating and we have determined here tonight, I think, they can continue to operate. We're not going to legislate them out of business. And there comes a time in life, everything changes. And this is across from the school, right in the middle of a nice residential area. And who knows if we rezone it, what could go in there? It could create a lot more traffic for the school or hazards for the kids. That's just that's my concerns at this point. Now, Brian, we always go, tell me why I'm wrong.
Was when was Glen Marlowe built? I remember a time when it wasn't there.
Oh,
I know I served my hard time at Mills River before Glen Marlowe. Some of that was served in solitary, but that was definitely my fault. But
The GIS real property records show 1999. as
so the business
year of
predates Glen
construction.
Marlowe.
Correct.
I think so.
So my thoughts, Jim, my microphone's on this time. Sorry, it wasn't earlier. Patty, you're supposed to be waving it. My wife's not texting you? Oh, well, I'll get on. At face value, if I were just to look at it, I wouldn't be a fan of it. Because as Michael pointed out, the other exceptions we've made have something adjacent or directly across the street, only a street. So it's kind of on an island and I don't like that. However, when you dig in further, it was existing before the incorporation of the town. And not only that, it was that business, that same business.
Well, that's my point.
And it
And it
future
can
land
continue,
use in the
that same
comprehensive
business.
plan, right? So
Right.
I can't fault you this time. I'm going to agree with you that it probably, I'm not seeing a reason to say no right now.
Well,
But
Yeah.
normally you've got residences on sides of it, and elementary school across.
Yeah,
But it was there.
normally, if this were a new use,
It'd be a hard no.
if there was a single family home there now,
Right.
and someone
Right.
came in and said, I'd really like to build this use here and we need you to rezone. And we,
When you put the word reasonable in this conversation, to me, it's reasonable to strongly weight that this was here and in existence prior to the incorporation of the town. I give a lot of weight to that.
But we've already determined it can continue.
With limitations.
But that's
with
not
strict
really what they're
limitations.
going for here. They're going for future value of the property.
Well, I understand that.
Right,
Yeah.
so whether that business can continue or not is to me just,
But then you can take the next door neighbor and they can say the same thing. Let me rezone mine.
They're changing.
do a
the use.
commercial,
They're changing. the
Is any,
use then.
any piece of
Yeah.
property around here,
Not the
particularly around,
same.
if you rezone it to commercial, it's worth many times more
That's,
than what
that's
it is. today.
changing the use of it. This is already commercial use.
Yeah,
I would
The,
assume the staff, Michael, would take into consideration these reasonablenesses before you made your recommendation to approve, right?
yes.
Okay.
The one other thing, I don't know if the board wants to consider too, is because this property was developed before the town. That, and again, I don't know what the county zoning code was then. But there seemed to be no commercial site requirements applied, so there is no zoning buffer. There is no waste container screening or anything else we require for a commercial site, so. If someone were to come in and do a building addition, those would be applied, which would actually
help. The architectural
bring
review
it
board,
into a conformance. Yeah.
everything would trigger, right?
and that brings up another question. Let's say that the applicant would like to have waste container screening. They can't. Correct? Can't build it now. Because that would be altering.
It's an expansion of the use, even if it's a dumpster.
Screening may not, planting some trees may not cause any issues, but so they can't even get into conformance with that. District overlay.
I still have my concerns about, we rezone it, what could go in there. Some are desirable, some are not so desirable. That's my concern.
Sure. And that's where
Then
the,
you still have this neighborhood around you and the school. The neighborhood now is comfortable, I'll assume, with what we have, and they can continue to operate.
So that's one of the bullet points on those, the benefits or detriment to the neighborhood. The neighbors, I'm sorry, and community separately listed. But that's part of the public hearing, I guess, for detailed information, but we're still allowed to discuss hypothetical.
sure.
Yeah.
Let me use the exact words there, benefits and detriments, correct? I mean, we're.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'd prefer if that were
To
discussed.
the individual, you know, the if I lived there question, are we allowed to ask that hypothetical question? That tends to change answers.
This property, and I apologize for not remembering the size of the property.
2.3 acres.
2.3 acres.
Yeah.
That in itself would limit some of the uses that could go in under MRNC.
What, like a hospital? Cause that's pretty,
Yes, I mean,
No.
that's a pretty small piece of property
Yeah.
for a lot of these uses here. And that's, do we, to establish a comfort with what could go here in the future. Maybe a childcare center could go there, daycare, or small retail business. Small offices or single family. I'm not sure that a communications towers would go there. That's a reasonable location. I think
Small
there are-
tower. That's a
Yeah.
small one.
I think
No
there are other
guidelines.
locations that would be better. For a hospital to go there, that's a pretty small piece of property. For a restaurant, I'm not sure that would be
It'd be
a
close
great
also.
location.
But those items would require a minor special use permit, so there would still be another look at it.
Still another look.
those are special use under MRNC.
Right here.
A bed and breakfast, well, that's really pretty much
Wrong
a single
page.
family home, just a little bigger. So that would
You wanna believe.
be anything I'd be concerned about.
It's a-
Auditoriums, theaters,
Thank you.
It would certainly be big enough for any theater I would perform at, because I wouldn't need anyone there, but maybe my cat, and he would heckle me. A small museum and things like that wouldn't necessarily be a detriment. So looking at what could go here that reasonably would go here, I don't see anything of any great concern. So we want to discuss the statements of consistency. That
Well, is there anything else to that line of thinking of what you think as a neighbor? As a community, I see less objections than I do as an immediate neighbor. If I'm an immediate neighbor, I'm probably showing up to the public hearing
just because of what. could
because I know what I have
here.
today and I don't know what this could give me tomorrow.
Well, there's some, you
If
know,
I'm a neighbor, that's
you know
how
a
I'm
little bit
thinking.
about what it could give you because it's listed right here.
Say that again?
I mean, you know a little bit about what could the future use be because it's
No,
listed right here.
Right, but the special use one is,
Yeah. Oh, I would show up at that, yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
the special
exact-
use one, if I
Yeah.
don't want to,
Gotcha.
I don't want a restaurant.
With
there, right?
something, you're right, something can't go in there
Whatever
without
that is, fill in the blank.
Right.
I'm just trying to think of both sides.
Yeah.
If I'm not. If I'm a neighbor, what's the benefit of this? Is there a single benefit if you're a neighbor? Not part of the community, but the neighbor. I get it. It also says owner. I see the benefit to the owner.
I think probably the neighbors would not see a tremendous amount of benefits.
No,
Just, I go back to the original zoning and wonder what was the mindset when the zoning was applied, knowing that this one piece of property was a nonconformance. And, you know, they created the nonconformance. And, you know, hasn't been an issue till now, but thinking about the future, it would be a pretty serious impact to that property if it stays in nonconformance. And is that something that, you know, had the opportunity, if this property had gone on the market before now, we would have seen this before now, I'm sure.
that's the whole reason this has never come up. They've been fortunate to have the same tenant. That's what's delayed.
Times
kicked it
change.
down the
and
road.
I think it down the road, this would be, in my opinion, a pretty good size impact as a realtor.
Oh, there's no doubt. Their future value is pigeonholed into that buyer
That
as
one
opposed to this
particular
buyer.
use.
I want this buying pool instead of that one. So there's, it's a no-brainer if you're the
That was something
landowner.
that was
The landowner here,
done back in 2004.
say that again?
That was put in place after this business was there, after this property was commercial use.
Right. I just keep going back to that it was, I wish I knew what the zoning was in Henderson County. And I know that, Michael, I know. Was that a commercial mix? I mean, they didn't have. It was a Horseshoe mailing address. There was
I don't remember
Henderson
a lot of
County.
zoning back.
Sorry?
I don't remember a lot of zoning back in the 90s, early 2000s.
You know, I know that's a snapshot in time and, you know, what did the county intend for that property to be allowed to do back then? Is a question and maybe it would change our conversation. I'm not sure. But, sorry, go ahead, Michael, please. I know we're putting you on the spot. See how fast. you
No,
can
that's why I bring the laptop now.
Yeah. Search.
So this is just from the Henderson County website.
Okay.
The Henderson County developed the land development code in the official zoning map in order to help direct growth, blah, blah, blah. The formal Board of Commissioners review process, which led to adoption of the land development code, began December of 2006. On September 19th of 2007, the Board of Commissioners of Henderson County unanimously voted to adopt the land development code in the zoning map as a county ordinance.
So
So it basically didn't.
Wild West,
It didn't become non-conforming until
1204, but
until
Yeah.
right.
through Mills River zoning.
clearly is that kind of structure, just the structure, they were pretty, they had a lot of options they could have used it for. And in my opinion, in that snapshot of time back then.
Okay, so. Of course, I've lost my place. Here we go.
I think the next one was the topic was relationship between the proposed uses and current uses of the adjacent properties.
Land.
If you look for
designated
reasonableness on
specific
each one of these.
uses, maintain zoning districts and associated use requirements to maintain land availability for the attraction and accommodation of commercial and industrial uses. Objective 6.2, adequate capacity to support job development. So maintain the zoning categories that allow for job-oriented uses. Make adequate provision for business formation, working and operating small businesses in residential areas. And objective 6.4, diversified and resilient local service economy. Identify land suitable for commercial development and maintain an adequate supply of developable land to support new investment.
Michael, could you pull the GIS up for this property again, please? The aerial,
Just the snapshot.
just, yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Long mouse.
yeah, just the screenshot. Roughly, you may know the answer, roughly what percentage of the 2.3 acres is improved? Okay. I should have asked you the question before I asked you to pull the map up. So. Roughly, yeah, improvements on that. Yep.
I'd say most of it's improved.
So my question is for him while he's looking that up. I'm wondering if this is something we rezone, if it could be subdivided and become two businesses in the future. You know, what percentage of it is improved now? It could, in theory, money aside, could be taken down and be subdivided. There's enough acreage there that it could be two parcels. Are there things on this list? I think the answer is yes, that could operate on 1.15.
Yeah, office, small office.
But are they gonna be that impactful? That big of a negative impact?
Ask the neighbor who went from having one business that was pretty quiet to having two noisy businesses. I'm just buying time for Michael right now. Bill. Like everyone laughed. They're still paying attention.
Still paying attention?
We're good. We're good.
Somebody could buy this and put single family homes on there as well, even if we.
Uh,
did-
Well,
that
you could
math
have-
doesn't work.
You could have 2 family homes on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that math doesn't work. I'm gonna tell you right now, that property is far more valuable than building two houses.
Yeah,
That math isn't there.
I don't know, the math has changed quite a bit recently.
Yeah.
This is very rough, but just doing an acreage calculation to acres, you have about 0.2 acres that is covered with buildings.
Plus your hard.
Only. But if you look at the site, yeah, there's plenty of gravel out there,
Impervious
impervious surfaces.
Impervious surface, thank you. Is mine. So what would zoning allow that to be divided into, if at all, if it were NC, if it were neighborhood commercial? Could it be divided into 2 or more parcels?
Yes,
Do you know how many? Is that 0.69 or is that?
it depends upon the use, because if it's a residential use, we have the minimum lot size of 0.69 acres,
Right.
30,000 square feet. If it's commercial use, there is no commercial minimum lot size,
There isn't.
not for commercial. But
So-
again, you know, a business is going to demand a certain amount of land. So it
And
can't be
I
too
get
small.
that, but if
Yeah,
I'm a neighbor, I'm asking this question, what could go there and what's the worst case scenario? And the
Mhm.
answer is still being determined in this conversation, but the topography is friendly enough that the fall off in the back is not extreme, right? Have you looked at a topo map for that? I'm sorry. Here I am again. So it's not that steep. I've been to the neighborhood in the back. It does slope down, but you know,
yeah, I would default to the property owners. There is a slope at the back of the
There
property
is.
where it drops off. That's all I know.
so just for the sake of the conversation, what if it was divided into 2 parcels? And they were both commercial and they were both conforming under neighborhood commercial? What could they be? Remember, we don't get to decide what it is. The conversation always has to be what's allowed.
And that's where we look at that list of land uses. And is there anything there that could reasonably go there?
Just pick an acre parcel and say there's two of them now.
Well, so single family dwelling, offices, I mean, that's a pretty small office. Fit there. and
Freestanding
park.
offices, right, could be strip
And
mall.
Offices, are they that loud? Retail? With a 2 acre or 1 acre parcel. And from a traffic engineering standpoint, it's all the size of the building. it's
The,
footprint
the-
of
the
building.
impact for the individual
amount-
residents behind there for your traffic
The
and your
amount
volume.
of the, square footage of the use itself. And, I can't think of the use that would fit on a 1 acre parcel.
There's a lot of these restaurants that are.
Maybe a
going-
Starbucks.
You're-
Yeah,
you're-
but you gotta
exactly,
have
your
a certain
drive-through
amount of
traffic.
parking also to go with
But-
it, so.
I don't know if you
drive-
guys have noticed, but Asheville's coming this way. So that's not something you can just dismiss. I'm not trying to be negative. I am trying to be negative actually right now, but I'm not
I-
trying to tuck anybody out of it. I'm just trying to think, what, if I'm the neighbor, this is how I'm acting. You guys need to figure out what worst case is and then tell me if that's tolerable or not.
Conditional zoning would sure make life a lot
That would
easier, right?
really help.
But, I just think this property's so small. The uses that could conceive.
Retaining wall back there?
Reasonably.
Is there a retaining wall back at the back of the
like a
property?
slope.
The wall? Are y'all neighbors? Okay, okay. There's a fence. Okay.
Okay. We got a motion, right?
So
We could entertain a motion. We did read the, reasonableness, the, statement of consistency, read through that. The motion would reflect, I would say the person making that motion would be stating that, agree with the statement of consistency and make the motion to approve. If anyone else has any other considerations they want to bring up or anything they want to say, now's the time. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'm sorry, I was
Okay,
processing
We
what I heard.
actually have a motion on the floor. Mr.
Technically-
Cole made a motion.
Yes.
so we've been, and sir, does your motion,
Still stands and includes all of the reasonableness and the objective and the objectives,
excellent, okay.
which
Mr.
it did to
Ross?
begin with, but I didn't enunciate that.
Excellent. Mr. Ross, anything?
Yeah, I'm torn on.
What's that?
I'm torn on it. I'm
You're torn.
undecided.
Yeah, and I'm torn as well. But I keep going back to 2004 when a non-conforming use was created through no fault.
Through no
or
fault of
from
the property owner, we're causing a pretty significant
impact.
detriment is the word here.
But then again, we all face difficulties every day that through no fault of our own. In any situation.
So at some point in the
But when the
future,
government causes it, I'm pretty ticked off.
so Jim,
Yeah.
at some point in the future, the building, let's just, dystopian times, like this building dilapidated beyond repair.
Yeah, I know.
What do you, at that point, what do you say to the property owner? You can't build something new here.
Well, let's
Yeah.
say the current use moves. They move closer to Asheville or further from Asheville or whatever, and it takes 8 months to find a new tenant. I mean,
Based on the current non-conforming.
based on the current, so. There you go.
It's not, it,
So you lose.
2 months
you
too
lose
long in
this-
that scenario.
Yeah, you lose this tenant, you conceivably lose the commercial aspect of the property.
Right, it's a great point. So what happens, Michael, if we do keep track of that 6 months of discontinued non-conforming use? What happens? It goes back to MR30? Oh, well, it is MR30, but the uses are restricted to what's at MR30 at that point. Is that
Correct.
correct? At the end
yeah,
of 6
I,
months?
I would most likely, again, if I were actively tracking it, send them a letter. A similar example I'll just bring up is the shade tree garage across from the other school in our jurisdiction at Schoolhouse and Banner Farm. That was sold to a different owner. The use during a transition period, it was not occupied, but it was within the 6 months. And they actually came to me ahead of time and got a zoning letter, basically putting all of the nonconformity language and the understanding between the town and the new buyer on paper. And they've met, they fell within the 6 month window. And now there's a new owner and operator. Because again, that property where the Shade Tree Garage is actually zone neighborhood commercial, but we don't allow auto repair garages in neighborhood commercial, as you've seen. It's only allowed in general business and I think mixed use. So that nonconformity continued even with a change in ownership, but they kept the same use, auto repair and sales.
So in this example, I think it's a good thing for me that you brought that up. So in this example, today, right now in the current market, they would have zero issues finding a tenant. But
To
that market
fit
may change and they
this
struggle to find a
exact
tenant
use.
and they're penalized because of that. I don't like that. If I worded that correctly. If not, you can reword it.
No, I think you said it, you got exactly,
You know,
that's one of the things that, it's a nonconformance now, it was created. And it really locks who can go there.
we're
And
fortunate to keep a tenant through all the market ups and downs over the last
6
19
months,
years since
is
that
not a
corporate
long time.
incorporation.
In my opinion, you're trying to find, even other buildings that I see have been, vacant because find someone to come in.
Jim, it's your turn. Tell me I'm wrong. It's your turn.
Oh.
Anything else to add to my thinking there?
No. I think we agree.
I'm still empathizing with the neighbors here a lot.
Yeah, I know.
I made a motion.
Well, that's
Can I
where I'm
ask a
coming from,
question?
too.
Yeah.
For clarity,
Yeah.
do we know, I know this is a really unfair question, but I don't know. Do we know whether that commercial building was there before the homes were built around it, or were there homes there already?
Some of them are 70s.
Okay,
So this is 78.
okay.
Yeah, but the Henderson County zoning,
I think it was probably there before I wasn't here, but.
there's a lot of homes there. The
I
60.
remember the Cowmasters was back there.
I will show you an aerial very quickly.
AS will be.
I can look here.
We got it.
So let's go back to 84.
We have some music
So
from
here's your commercial building. You can see where the current homes are, where the green dots are, but I don't
But
know.
there are no homes there then.
They're not homes there.
This was in the 70s, right?
There's
84.
84.
No, I'm sorry. This building,
Oh, 78, I believe.
78. I'm sorry. I feel confident saying this, just to you, Jeff. I do not feel in any way this is unreasonable spot zone. I do not feel that.
Yeah.
Any hesitation you're hearing from me is that neighbor. But I don't feel it's unreasonable. Just bringing the gloves or
Sure.
taking them
I
off.
think if this were to come before us with no use there now and a rezoning, then I would have heartburn with that. Because to me, that would be more of a spot zoning. I think this was created.
Orly, you said the statement of consistency is for the council, not for. Are we making this part of our motion?
It can be part of your motion. It's for Mr. Moore to sign.
Okay.
For me to sign.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I don't see his signature. Oh, no, his signature's on the back. There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see it requested on the front, so that's why I was asking.
So normally the board can either make a motion to recommend approval and approving the consistency statement, or you can make two separate motions, one for the recommendation for approval or denial, and then one for a consistency statement.
And so the motion that we have on the table right now,
Did not.
It
So-
did include reasonableness and the objectives.
it does include reasonableness and the objectives. So we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Ryan Roscoe, second. I do.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, I'd like to entertain a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we have unanimous. And I will sign whichever official copy I need to sign when the time comes. Okay. Additional items, any board comments?
I'll make a comment I've made several times before. I think our notice to the public that's posted on the property needs to be considerably larger. You know, that little,
You're talking about the special use permit signs that are out there?
well, any of these type notifications, we need to make something that somebody could read traveling 35 miles an hour. I know there's one out right now that's coming up. And I was looking for it because I know it's coming up. And I did find it today, but there's no way I could read it. And I can't stop on this busy traffic and read it. I just think we need to come up with a decent sized sign. And I know in other jurisdictions, they have a 4x8 as a matter of fact. And it's worded, so all you do is just change the number. Because it says the same thing every time. That's just my comment. I keep making this, and I know y'all heard it before.
Okay,
Talking about transparency.
transparency is good. Would anyone like to comment? Open it up again, for public comment. It's an additional item. If y'all have anything you'd like to say, we appreciate you being here. It's always good to see people here. This is the opportunity, for people to come talk and make your opinions and your thoughts known, and we can learn from you as well. It's all part of the process. Okay. Staff update. Staff have an update.
Quite a few.
Oh my, I shouldn't have talked so much.
No, well, again, adding this to the agenda, I just want the planning board to be more in tune with what's going on in the town, both in development and just activity with other boards. One thing I did want to highlight, and this is brand new news from today, is the state legislature had a Senate Bill 675, that basically had some language slipped in it that would require any local government to have their minimum lot size no larger than 8,700 square feet or 5 units an acre for density. That just went to, I think, the Finance Committee for the Senate today, and council did issue a resolution in opposition to that at their last meeting, and thankfully all of that language was pulled. So that's a good win for us. There was a lot of opposition from all local governments, basically with the state preempting local density and minimum lot size controls. So that is no longer a concern to the town, although there are other bills we are still tracking, including the accessory dwelling unit bill that would allow an accessory dwelling on any property with a single family home, and one of the workforce housing bills. We've seen a large increase in small subdivision activity recently. I think I've done, by the end of this week, 8 or 9 in 3 weeks. No major subdivisions are expected to come down the pipeline for this board. Maybe in the fall, maybe early next year, but nothing coming up. I don't know if anyone's been following the budget presentation to council, but one item I did want to bring up is that in the capital improvement plan, the planning department has requested monies for a unified development ordinance. Now that I've brought on our planning technician, Kevin Webb, and we've been doing more code enforcement and digging into the ordinance more, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get everything consistent, take away inconsistencies in the code, and again, better defining things to what the governing body would like to see, because that'll allow clarification for staff to, again, make these types of interpretations y'all are asking about in the future. But that will be a multi-year project, probably 2 years to get that done. And basically we'll be looking at our current code, reorganizing and rewriting some of it. Just a couple projects, Mills River self-storage, I call them the South. It's a 4.5 acre property just north of Turkey Pen Road. They are going to be getting zoning permit approval probably tomorrow. That's for about 45,000 square feet of self-storage space. between Huey Drive and Happy Valley Drive. We have the conditional zoning text amendment going before council in the public hearing on this Thursday, June 8th. Appalachian Mountain Brewery is making good progress on their parking lot. We were able to issue a watershed permit where the vast majority of their parking lot basically incorporates a permeable design. So rainwater, stormwater can flow through large stone and into the groundwater. So that's progressing. I'm sure everyone has seen the progress at the B&F ceramic site that's next to the fire department. Again, that's for about 117,000 square feet of total warehouse space. A new CO we issued is for Eurosport motorcycle, Eurosport Asheville, on 2133 Old Fanning Bridge Road. So if you're ever up on Old Fanning Bridge and you see a new business up there with a flashy sign, that's them. Ingalls made improvements to their parking lot through a resurfacing project, so they've restriped a lot of the lines. They are expected to come back in probably a month or two to actually replace the main crosswalk entrances to the store with, I don't know if it'll be raised, but basically bricks and pavers. So it will really call out the pedestrian zone and hopefully contribute to a safer crossing for pedestrians going into the store there. Staff has completed the review for the schoolhouse industrial project. This is about 170,000 square feet of warehouse industrial space at the northeast corner of Schoolhouse and Banner Farm Road. So the developer has all those comments and we're waiting for revised plans. Another big project we've completed the review for is an expansion to the Landings Nursing Home on Haywood Road down here next to the Hendersonville Water Treatment Plant. They are proposing an extended care facility or a senior housing facility on that vacant piece of property in front of the existing nursing home. And then I heard some talk earlier, of course, about John Abbott resigning. And so I just wanted to inform the board that going before council this Thursday will be a slate of applications and a new member hopefully being appointed to this board. That's all I got.
Thank you very much. We'll miss Mr. Abbott. Appreciate his contribution to the board and his wisdom, and he will be missed. So, all right. And with that being said, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
You seem to hesitate. All those in favor? Aye. And we're adjourned. Thank you.